Felix Young's name, whispered from a rusty drain, as a cat with a clockwork, I watched him beside a ringing rotary phone dissolving into ash. I scrape rust from the drainpipe's teeth, the metal screaming like a hinge torn from its socket. Electric violet footprints glow beneath my fingertips, cold as a bruise on the retina. The wind scream catches in the drainpipe's teeth, a sound like a broken gear grinding its molars. My molars vibrate with the metallic rasp, a physical pulse in my jawbone. The cat's clockwork eye flares, the rusted gear turning like a clockwork heart. Footprints lead toward the park entrance, glowing brighter as the wind howls. I taste copper in the air, the taste of old blood and wet earth. The rotary phone's cord dissolves into ash, the last chime fading into dust. I hear my name again, audible as a physical vibration in my teeth, a low thrumming in the drain's hollow core. The sound isn't whispered, it's twin-pulsed, a physical wave against my skull. I press my palm flat against the drainpipe, feeling the cold seep through my glove, the metal grainy as dead skin, the footprints shift, glowing violet light flaring like a bruise blooming beneath the park's surface. The cat watches. Its one eye a rusted clockwork gear turning slowly, the sound a distorted hiss like steam escaping a broken pipe. I hear my name again, Felixy. A single word, sharp as a knife, vibrating through the drainpipe's hollow core. The wind howls, a gale force, scream tearing at my coat. The park entrance lies ahead, the footprints leading straight into the shadowed trees. The cat's gear eye flares brighter, the sound of metallic grinding, the sound of time itself being unraveled. I feel the cold seep into my bones, the sound of ice cracking underfoot, the wind scream caught in the drainpipe's teeth. The footprints glow brighter, electric violet light flaring like a bruise on the park's skin. I hear my name again, clearer this time. The sound of physical wave against my molars. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound a distorted hiss like steam escaping a broken pipe. The footprints lead toward the park entrance, the glow pulsing like a slow heartbeat. I press my hand flat against the drainpipe, feeling the cold seep through my glove, the metal grainy as dead skin. The wind howls, a gale force scream tearing at my coat. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound of metallic grinding, the sound of time itself being unraveled. The footprints glow brighter, electric violet light, flaring like a bruise blooming beneath the park's surface. I hear my name again, Felixy, a single word, sharp as a knife, vibrating through the drainpipe's hollow core. The sound isn't whispered, it's pulsed, a physical wave against my skull. The cat's gear eye flares brighter, the sound of metallic grinding, the sound of time grinding its teeth. The footprints lead straight toward the park entrance, glowing electric violet light flaring like a slow heartbeat. I feel the cold seep into my bones, the sound of ice cracking underfoot, the wind scream caught in the drainpipe's teeth. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound a distorted hiss like steam escaping a broken pipe. The footprints glow brighter, electric violet light flaring like a bruise on the park's skin. I feel the cold seep into my molars, the sound of my name vibrating through the drainpipe's hollow core. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound of metallic grinding, the sound of time unraveling. The footprints glow brighter, electric violet light flaring like a slow heartbeat. I feel the cold seep into my bones, the sound of ice cracking underfoot. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound a distorted hiss like steam escaping a broken pipe. The footprints lead toward the park entrance, the glow pulsing like a slow heartbeat. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound of metallic grinding, the sound of time unraveling. I feel the cold seep into my molars, the sound of my name vibrating through the drainpipe's hollow core. The footprints glow brighter, electric violet light flaring like a bruise blooming beneath the park's surface. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound a distorted hiss like steam escaping a broken pipe. The footprints lead straight toward the park entrance, glowing electric violet light flaring like a slow heartbeat. I feel the cold seep into my bones, the sound of ice cracking underfoot. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound of metallic grinding, the sound of time unraveling. The footprints glow brighter, electric violet light flaring like a bruise on the park's skin. The sound of my name vibrates through the drainpipe's hollow core, the sound of physical pulse in my jaw. I feel the cold seep into my molars, the sound of time grinding its teeth. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound a distorted hiss like steam escaping a broken pipe. The footprints glow brighter, electric violet light flaring like a slow heartbeat. I feel the cold seep into my bones, the sound of ice cracking underfoot. The cat's gear eye flares, the sound of metallic grinding, the sound of time unraveling. A new word forms in Felix Young's blood, Forihunamadi. The rust gave way with a shriek, not of metal protesting, but of something. Within the metal, a high-pitched whine, like a dentist's drill on enamel, resonated through the drain pipe as I pried. My gloved fingers slipped on the pitted surface, the metal slick with something that wasn't moisture. It felt granular, almost organic, under the nitrile. The sound amplified, blossoming into a grating rasp that vibrated in my teeth, not against them but through them, a physical resonance. I braced my weight against the brick wall, the rough stone biting into my shoulder blades. The gear itself was smaller than I'd expected, no larger than my thumb. Corroded, of course. Everything here was consumed by a slow, creeping rust. But this wasn't the orange bloom of oxidation. It was a violet, almost black, that clung to the teeth of the gear like dried blood. I tugged again, and it came free with a final protesting scream soothed, a sound that felt less mechanical and more biological. The cat perched on the damp earth, mirrored my movement, tilting its head. Not with curiosity, but with a disconcerting precision. Its single clockwork eye, that rusted gear within a socket of fur, didn't follow my hand, but anticipated it. Fractured vowels formed in the air, not spoken but fu-shaped by the wind. A fragmented language, a series of clicks and hisses that felt intentional. It wasn't mimicking my actions, it was commenting. A guttural rasp, a sound like pebbles grinding together. The gear felt warm in my palm, radiating a faint heat. I examined it, turning it over, the violet corrosion flaking off in minuscule scales. It was then I noticed the matching indentation on my wrist, just below the cuff of my coat, a perfect fit. Without conscious thought, I brought the gear to my skin. The moment the corroded metal touched my flesh, a cold fire blossomed. Not pain, but a spreading numbness that quickly morphed into a pulsing ache. The skin beneath the gear darkened, blooming with the same electric violet as the corrosion. It wasn't a bruise, not exactly. More like a stain spreading beneath the surface, a slow bloom of color that throbbed in time with my heartbeat. Each pulse sent a tremor through my arm, a metallic tang on my tongue. The cat's gear eye flared, the rusted mechanism spinning faster, a whirring that scraped against the silence. The sound wasn't audible, not to my ears, it was felt. In my bones I flexed my wrist, watching the violet stain expand. It wasn't confined to the point of contact. It was spreading, tendrils of color reaching up my forearm, down my hand. The texture of my skin altered, becoming slick, almost polished. I touched the spreading stain, and it yielded, not like flesh, but like... The cat let out a sound, a complex series of clicks and hisses, a vocalization that somehow resolved into a distorted echo of my own name. It wasn't a call, it was a calibration, a tuning of frequencies. The ache intensified, the pulsing bruise now a visible throbbing mass. I could feel the gear sinking into my wrist, becoming one with my bone, my muscle, my very being. It wasn't being twide absorbed, it was rewriting. The violet bled, not blood, but a thick, viscous ink. The ink pooled on the back of my hand, running down my fingers, leaving a trail of shimmering residue. The residue didn't dry, it glowed. The cat's gear eye flared again, brighter this time, and the violet ink on my hand began to move, forming patterns, symbols, a language I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. The patterns pulsed, mirroring the beat of my heart, the whirring of the cat's eye, the grinding of the gear now fused to my wrist. The air tasted of static, and the violet ink bled. The footprints glowed, a sickly luminescence against the damp earth, leading away from the drain and deeper into the skeletal embrace of the forest. Each impression pulsed with that same electric violet, a chromatic heartbeat against the muted greens and browns of the undergrowth. The wind, a constant, malevolent presence, tugged at my coat, a relentless hand trying to push me back. It tasted of ozone, sharp and metallic on my tongue, a flavor that clung to the back of my throat. The cat, its single rusted gear, eye rotating with unnerving precision, moved ahead, a glitching phantom in the dim light. Its gait wasn't a walk, but a purposeful glide, as if drawn by an unseen tether. The footprints led to a dead tree, its trunk blackened and scarred, a monument to some forgotten blight. Carved into the bark, swirling symbols mirrored the violet corrosion on the gear, a language I didn't understand, yet felt resonating within my bones. The tree's branches, gnarled and twisted, clicked like broken clock parts in the wind, a discordant rhythm against the howling gale. A click, a click, a click, click, click. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt. A vibration in the marrow of my arm. The cat nudged my leg, a sharp, insistent pressure. It wasn't a request, but a command. The footprints terminated abruptly at the base of the tree, swallowed by the encroaching undergrowth. But something else waited there. A drain, half hidden by roots and fallen leaves, pulsed with the same electric violet light as the footprints. It wasn't a steady glow, but a throbbing rhythmic pulse like a diseased heart. The air around it shimmered, distorting the view behind it, blurring the edges of reality. The scent of ozone intensified, burning my nostrils. I could feel a prickling sensation on my skin, a static charge that raised the hairs on my arms. I knelt, the damp earth seeping through my gloves. The drain wasn't made of metal or concrete. It was something organic, a porous, yielding material that felt strangely warm to the touch. The violet light emanated from within, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the tree's scarred trunk. The cat emitted a series of clicks and hisses, a fragmented vocalization that seemed to be directed at the drain, a form of communication. It wasn't sound, not exactly. It was a resonance, a vibration that resonated within my skull, a pressure behind my eyes. The wind intensified, tearing at the branches, creating a chorus of clicking and groaning. The sound wasn't just a sound, it was a force, a physical pressure against my eardrums. My internal monologue felt distant, muffled, as if separated by a thick layer of cotton. I tried to focus, to anchor myself to the present, but the violet light pulsed, hypnotic and disorienting. The cat's gear eye flared, a sudden burst of light that momentarily blinded me. When my vision cleared, the drain's light had coalesced, forming a shape. A face. It was my face. A distorted, grotesque parody of my own features. The skin was stretched taut over the bone, the eyes wide and vacant, the mouth twisted into a silent scream. The violet light intensified, illuminating the details with sickening clarity. The face wasn't projected, wasn't an illusion. It was emerging, as if the drain itself was birthing a reflection of me. The wind howled, a mournful dirge, and the face in the drain began to move, mimicking my expressions, anticipating my thoughts. It wasn't mirroring me, it was Stevie Tumming becoming me, a slow, agonizing transformation. The sound wasn't a whisper, not precisely. It was a tearing, a wet rasp against the silence, like parchment pulled from a tomb. Hurrup! My name, Felix. It resonated from the drain, a fractured, guttural imitation. I recoiled, a reflexive spasm. The cat, its gear eye burning with an unsettling luminescence, tilted its head, a jerky mechanical movement. You buried the patient's case file. The words weren't formed, not in the way language is constructed. They were extracted, drawn from the air, layered over the dripping of water and the groan of the wind. The scent of ozone intensified, a metallic tongue coating my tongue. I felt a phantom pressure on my chest, a weight I couldn't define. My breath hitched. The drain pulsed, the violet light throbbing in sync with the disembodied voice. The cat emitted a series of clicks, a fragmented vocalization that resonated within my skull, a pressure behind my eyes. It wasn't a question, but an accusation. My fingers tightened around the damp earth, the cold seeping into my bones, the face in the drain. My grotesque parody shifted, its twisted lips forming the words with a sickening precision. It wasn't speaking Freunde. Me, it was speaking for me. It was speaking for me. My mind struggled to reconcile the impossible. The patient, case file. I remembered the paperwork, the meticulous notes, the pressure from above to close the investigation quickly, a convenient death, a wealthy family, a quiet resolution. Had I suppressed evidence? The thought felt alien, repulsive. You lied to the widow. The tearing sound returned, louder this time, a visceral assault on my senses. Rip, rip, the air shimmered, the edges of reality blurring. The face in the drain contorted, mimicking a grimace of accusation. I felt a surge of nausea, a dizzying disorientation. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the voice, the light, My hand instinctively moved to my pocket, a frantic search for something I couldn't name. The file, where was the file? The fabric of my trousers felt rough against my skin, the damp earth clinging to my gloves. My fingers brushed against empty space. The file was gone. A wave of cold washed over me, a physical manifestation of dread. The cat's gear I flared. A sudden, blinding burst of violet light. When my vision cleared, the drain's light had intensified, the face within radiating an almost palpable malice. It wasn't just mirroring my fear now, it was feeding on it. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, a strangled gasp. My internal monologue felt distant, muffled as if separated by a thick layer of cotton. I tried to ground myself, to focus on the physical sensations, the damp earth, the wind's relentless assault, the cat's unsettling gaze. But the face in the drain was inescapable, a constant accusing presence. The wind howled, a mournful dirge that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. The trees groaned, their branches thrashing against the sky, a chaotic dance of despair. I felt a prickling sensation on my skin, a static charge that raised the hairs on my arms. The air tasted of ozone, sharp and metallic. The face in the drain began to speak again, the words forming in my mind, not through my ears. They weren't a question or an accusation, they were a statement, a confirmation. Your secret. The tearing sound returned, a final agonizing crescendo. The rip. The drain pulsed, the violet light intensifying, bathing the tree and the forest in an unearthly glow. The face in the drain, my face, stretched, distorted, a silent scream etched onto its features. And then the drain began to shift, the organic material rippling and reforming, as if the very structure was dissolving. The face within seemed to melt, to flow outwards, spreading across the drain's surface like viscous liquid. It wasn't a disintegration, but a transformation. The violet light intensified, consuming everything in its path. The cat hissed, a frustrated, mechanical expulsion of air. It nudged my leg again, harder this time. A desperate plea. But I was frozen, trapped in the face's gaze, a silent witness to its metamorphosis. The drain's surface now resembled my skin, stretched and taut, and from within a new voice echoed. It was my voice, but deeper, colder, and utterly alien. The silver whistle felt cold, alien against my palm. I raised it to my lips, the metal a stark contrast to the damp earth clinging to my gloves, a futile gesture, I knew. The wind, a relentless, rasping presence, tore at my coat, carrying the scent of pine and something else, something acrid and indefinable. The cat, its gear eye burning like a fractured sun, watched with an unsettling stillness. I blew. A weak, reedy note escaped the whistle, swallowed almost instantly by the wind's howl. No response, no answering call. Just the persistent groan of the trees and the metallic rasp of the wind against my ears. I tried again, harder this time, forcing a breath through the cold metal. The note fractured, distorted, and then ceased. The whistle crumbled. Not shattered, not broken, but dissolved. The silver seemed to melt, flaking away in a fine, shimmering dust that settled on my palm. It tasted of blood. A coppery tang bloomed on my tongue, bitter and unwelcome. I instinctively licked my palm, a futile attempt to cleanse the taste. The dust clung, a gritty residue. Then the word formed. Not spoken, not seen, but I felt, pressed into the skin of my hand. Tavetri. The letters etched themselves into my flesh, a phantom inscription that burned with a cold internal fire. I stared at my hand, the dust swirling like miniature constellations. The cat emitted a series of clicks, a fragmented vocalization that resonated within my skull, a pressure behind my eyes. It wasn't a sound precisely, but a transmission, a data stream injected directly into my consciousness. Your secret is mine now. The words weren't formed, not in the way language is constructed. They were extracted, layered over the wind's howl and the taste of blood. The scent of ozone intensified, a metallic tang coating my tongue. The phantom pressure on my chest returned, a weight I couldn't define. I felt a surge of nausea, a dizzying disorientation. The world tilted. The familiar solidity of the forest floor dissolved. The trees, the undergrowth, the path I had been following Sudi, all vanished. I was suspended adrift in a void of swirling grey. The sensation was less a visual phenomenon and more a structural collapse, as if the very architecture of reality had fractured, the grey coalesced. It wasn't a blank canvas, but a tapestry woven from shifting shadows and half-formed shapes. I felt a pull, a gravitational force drawing me downwards. My boots landed not on earth, but on something yielding, something organic, a surface that pulsed with a faint, internal rhythm. I looked down. The ground wasn't earth. It wasn't rock. It was me. Or rather, a distorted reflection of me. A landscape sculpted from my own skin. The texture was familiar, unsettlingly so. The fine lines etched around my eyes, the faint scar above my eyebrow twin. All replicated in the undulating terrain. The metallic taste intensified, coating my mouth with a thick viscous film. The cat materialized beside me, its gear eye reflecting the distorted landscape. It nudged my leg, a sharp, insistent pressure. I felt a compulsion to follow, a silent command woven into the fabric of this impossible place. The dust on my palm shifted, reforming. Words bloomed across my skin, twisting and rearranging themselves. They weren't letters anymore, but symbols, glyphs that resonated with a primal, unsettling power. I tried to brush them away, but they clung, embedded in my flesh. On make, the word pulsed, radiating a wave of cold that paralyzed me. The landscape shimmered, the distorted reflection of myself rippling like water. The air thickened, becoming viscous, suffocating. I struggled to breathe, the metallic taste overwhelming. The wind no longer a howl but a choked gasp pressed against my face. The ground beneath me began to dissolve, the surface of my skin landscape liquefying. I felt myself sinking, drawn downwards into a swirling vortex of grey. The cat hissed, a frustrated expulsion of air, its gear eye flashing a desperate signal. I reached out, a futile attempt to grasp something, anything to anchor myself. My fingers closed on empty air. The word futan make burned into my mind, a command echoing through my skull. It wasn't a request, or even a threat. It was a directive, a program, and I, it seemed, was the target. The cracking began subtly, a faint report beneath my boots that I initially dismissed as the settling of frost. Then it escalated, a network of fractures spiderwebbing across the ground, each snap a brittle counterpoint to the wind's relentless rasp. The violet lines pulsed beneath the ice, a sickly luminescence that seemed to emanate from the very earth. It wasn't ice precisely, more like a membrane, a skin stretched taut over something. Else the familiar solidity of the trail, the path I'd followed for what felt like an eternity, simply vanished, swallowed by a shifting, violet topography. The cat, its gear eye a malevolent pinpoint of light, nudged my leg again, a sharper pressure this time. It didn't meow or hiss or make any recognizable feline sound. Only that internal resonance, that data stream pressed directly into my skull, a constant thrumming. The phantom pressure on my chest intensified, a physical manifestation of the disorientation blooming within me. I tasted something acrid like burnt sugar and ozone clinging to the back of my throat. The landscape folded. The trees, the undergrowth, the remnants of the forest, 20, all dissolved into a vortex of violet light, a swirling funnel that seemed to draw the very air from my lungs. I stumbled, my boots scraping against the fracturing surface, the cracking a chorus of impending doom. The scent of ozone thickened, stinging my nostrils, and the taste of copper returned, heavier this time, almost metallic enough to choke. I was falling. Not downwards, not in a conventional sense, but Tuffianward, drawn into the vortex of violet light. The sensation was less a physical descent and more a structural collapse, as if the laws of physics themselves were unraveling. I reached out, instinctively, grasping for something, anything, to anchor myself. My fingers closed on nothing but the swirling light, the violet consuming everything. Then a drain, not a physical drain, not a pipe or a conduit, but a visual anomaly, a shimmering aperture of violet light, suspended in the vortex. It pulsed with an internal rhythm, a slow, deliberate beat that resonated with the pressure in my chest. I could see, or perhaps fruity sense, a depth beyond the violet, a darkness that seemed to suck the very light from the surrounding space. My reflection stared back, not a clear, recognizable image, but a distorted mockery of my own features. The violet light fractured across my face, highlighting the lines etched around my eyes, the scar above my eyebrow, and then superimposed over my reflection, a clockwork eye twin. The same rusted gear that replaced the cat's left eye, staring back at me with an unsettling intelligence. It wasn't merely a reflection. It was an imposition, a layering of realities. The cat emitted a fragmented vocalization, a series of clicks and whirs that bypassed my ears entirely, drilling directly into my consciousness. The internal resonance intensified, coalescing into something resembling words, though they weren't spoken aloud. They formed directly within my mind, a cold, invasive presence. Your past is your cage. The words weren't a statement, but a diagnosis, a pronouncement. The violet light intensified, the vortex tightening around me, pulling me relentlessly towards the drain. I tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the swirling light, a pathetic gurgle lost in the chaos. The metallic taste became overwhelming, coating my tongue, my throat, my lungs. It felt as if I were drowning in blood. The vortex tugged, and I was drawn towards the drain. The violet light consumed everything, and I plunged into the darkness. The cat's gear eye, the last thing I saw, a malevolent beacon in the swirling void. The cracking of the ice faded, replaced by a deeper, more resonant hum. A vibration that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of reality. Then a whisper, a single drawn-out syllable resonating within the darkness, a siren call. Thicum, the phone. Its body is old. The kind that belonged to a man who measured his life in minutes. Its plastic casing is warped. The digits blackened as if burned from the inside. The rotary dial sticky with something that isn't heat dust. I turn it over in my palms, feeling the weight of it, heavier than it should be, as though the device itself is pulling against the laws of physics. The cord hangs limp, a dead snake coiled around my wrist, and the receiver is cold, not just to the touch, but in the way it seems to absorb heat from the air itself. The wind outside has died down, but the silence is too peaceful. It's just the kind of quiet that precedes a scream, the kind that settles into the bones. I press the receiver to my ear. No dial tone, no hum of electricity, no static. Just the hollow click of the dial waiting, eager. The cat sits beside me, its fur a patchwork of shadows and something else, something that doesn't quite reflect light the way fur should. The gear. Eye ticks, a slow, deliberate rotation. The metal grinding against itself with a sound like teeth scraping glass. It doesn't blink. It doesn't need to. Its other eye, black, liquid, food on wrong, watches me with the patience of a predator that has already decided on its meal. I exhale, and the breath fogs the receiver. Not from cold, from something else. The condensation slides down the plastic in streaks. Not water, not quite, but something thicker, slower, like oil bleeding from a rusted hinge. I wipe it away with my thumb and press the receiver harder against my ear. The silence is alive, pressing back. Then the first crack. Not a sound, a feeling, a fracture in the air, a hairline split that runs from the crown of my skull down my spine, splitting the world in two. The phone in my hand shudders. The digits begin to soften, the blackened plastic giving way like wet paper. My fingers tighten, but the material doesn't resist. It peels away in thin sheets, curling at the edges like the pages of a book left too long in the rain. The receiver follows, the cord unspooling from the wall socket with a sound like a man pulling his own intestines from his belly. The dial spins on its own, the numbers blurring, the blackened plastic dissolving into ash. The doesn't fall, but twin floats suspended in the air like embers in zero gravity. I drop the phone. It hits the floor, but it doesn't break. Instead, it melts, not into a puddle, but into a spreading stain, a dark, wet sigil that seeps into the wood beneath it. The ash rises in a slow, deliberate spiral, coalescing into the shape of a face. My face, but wrong! The eyes are the cat, Skier and the other eye, the mouth a jagged line of teeth that aren't mine. The image flickers unstable, like a reflection in a pond disturbed by a thrown stone. Then it settles, the ash reforming into a clock face, the hands spinning backward, the numbers bleeding into violet. The countdown begins. No voice announces it, no mechanical beep. Just the numbers, each one a pulse against my temple, a pressure behind my eyes. The cat, as voice, isn't teat in my ears. It's in the marrow of my bones, a vibration that rearranges the words before I even understand them. Time is the cage. Asterisk, the wind returns, not howling now, but whispering, a sound like 1,000 fingers dragging across glass. The ash from the phone swirls in the air, forming shapes that dissolve before I can name them. The countdown ticks downward, each second a hammer blow against my ribs. Asterisk, 0 hours, 0 minutes and 5 seconds. Asterisk, the wood beneath the phone groans, not from the weight, from something deeper, something waking. Asterisk, 0 hours, 0 minutes and 4 seconds. Asterisk, the air thickens, not with heat, with the taste of copper and something older, something that smells like the inside of a coffin left open in the sun. Asterisked, 0 hours, 0 minutes and 3 seconds. Asterisk the cat's tail lashes. The gear. I whirs, a sound like a clock striking midnight, but there's no chime, only the grinding of gears against teeth. Asterisks, 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 2 seconds. Asterisk the reflection in the ash shifts. My face is still there, but the mouth moves without sound, forming words that aren't teeth for me. Asterisk, 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 1 second. Asterisk the phone. S remains collapse inward, not into dust, but into a single pulsing point of violet light. The countdown resets. The cat, S voice slithers into my skull, a serpent uncoiling in my mind. Asterisk, and then the light blinks out. The silence is absolute. The wind is gone. The cat's eye is still, and I am left with the sound of my own breath, ragged and uneven, the only proof that I am still alive. The drain in the floor is open, and it is void waiting. The notebook paper lies flat on the table, its surface unbroken save for the faintest ridge where the crease should be. I press the tip of the pen against it. Click-o! And the nib springs open with a sound like a joint cracking under pressure. The inkwell is empty, but that's not the problem. The problem is the ink itself. It doesn't flow. It resists. I twist the pen harder, and the tip drags across the paper with a wet, tearing hiss, as though the fibers are alive and fighting back. A single word forms under my hand, not swimming, and the letters bleed outward in jagged violet strokes, like bruises spreading beneath the skin. The scent of copper fills my mouth, thick and metallic, and I taste it again, the same as before, the same as the first time the drain hissed my name. The cat watches, its gear eye ticks slow and deliberate, the rusted teeth grinding against each other with a sound like a saw-cutting bone. It doesn't blink. It doesn't need to. The other eye, black, liquid, fit wrong, fixes on me, unrelenting. I swallow, and the taste lingers, sharp and familiar like the memory of a wound that never healed. I write again. The pen moves on its own, not quite guided by my hand, but through. It is as though my fingers are just a conduit for something else. The word Felix forms, but the letters twist, the twisty elongating into a jagged line, the eye splitting into 2 dots that pulse like eyes. The paper warps beneath the ink, the fibers curling inward as if the word is burning its way through. The copper taste floods my throat, and I gag, but there's no relief, just the pressure behind my ribs, the weight of something pressing against my lungs. The cat's voice isn't in my ears. It's in the marrow of my bones, a vibration that rearranges the words before I even understand them. You are not human, from the ink smears, not from the pen, from the air itself. The violet bleeds outward in tendrils, forming shapes that aren't words anymore but gears, cogs interlocking, grinding, the metallic rust filling the room. The paper groans, the fibers splitting apart like dry flesh, and the ink seeps into the cracks, forming a clockwork pattern, gears turning in reverse, the hands spinning backward, the numbers bleeding into violet. I try to stop. My hand trembles, but the pen doesn't listen. It drags across the page, the nib scratching like a fingernail against glass, and the word Fuchenmin forms beneath Felixes, the letters twisting, the footing splitting again, the choice stretching into a line that isn't a letter at all but a blade, sharp and jagged. Your name is mine. The copper taste turns to iron. I retch, but nothing comes up. The ink keeps bleeding, the gears keep turning, the cat's eye keeps watching. The paper tears, the fibers splitting apart, and the ink seeps into the cracks, forming a shape that isn't a word anymore but a face. My face, but wrong. The mouth stretched too wide, the teeth too many, the eyes black and liquid and wrong. The pen slips from my fingers. It hits the table with a thud, but it doesn't break. It melts, not into a puddle but into a spreading stain, a dark wet sigil that seeps into the wood beneath it. The ink rises in a slow, deliberate spiral, coalescing into the shape of a clock face, the hands spinning backward, the numbers bleeding into violet. The cat's voice slithers into my skull, a serpent uncoiling in my mind. Your name is mine. And then the words on the page shift. Not just the ink, the fopper. The fibers rearrange themselves, forming new letters, new shapes, the gears turning faster, the metallic rust filling the room, the copper taste choking me. I don't recognize the language. The cat's eye whirs, the gear grinding against itself with a sound like a saw-cutting bone. Your name is mine. The glass doesn't reflect. It swallows. My fingers press against the surface of the mirror, the condensation there thick and greasy, not water but something slicker, like the residue left by a spider's leg after it's dragged itself across the ceiling. The park trail is gone. The wind, the pine, the rusted signpost, bent double by years of gale, all of it erased, replaced by a void that pulses with a dull, throbbing violet. Not light, not dark, a wound in the air where the edges of the world should be but aren't. My breath fogs the glass, but the fog doesn't dissipate. It clings, forming letters that aren't mine. The steam curls into the shape of Carl. Interlocking cogs grinding against one another, the metallic scricky of rusted teeth filling my skull. I jerk my hand back, and the condensation splinters like ice, the cracks radiating outward in jagged lines. The reflection doesn't wait for me to return. It's already there, staring back, or trying to set. The surface ripples, not with distortion, but with hunger. The violet light warping inward as though something beneath the glass is pulling itself up through the surface. You are not Felix Young. The voice isn't in my ears. It's in the fusion bones of my teeth, vibrating the molars until they ache. I press my tongue against the roof of my mouth, and the taste of copper floods my senses again, thick and cloying like the aftertaste of a coin left too long in the palm. The mirror's reflection shifts. The gears in my mouth unspool, grinding against the back of my throat, the scritch of rusted metal against flesh. My jaw unhinges with a sound like a hinge in need of oil, and the reflection's mouth opens wider than it should, the lips peeling back to reveal rows of teeth that aren't mine. Too many, too sharp, filed to points that gleam with a wet sheen. I stumble back, my heel catching on something solid. The floor isn't wood anymore. It's like parchment, brittle and yellowed, the fibers splitting under my weight with a sound like dry kindling snapping. The air tastes of ink and something older, something that smells like the inside of a coffin. The violet light pulses, and the shadow beneath the mirror so breathes. Not in and out. It twirly pulses, a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction, the edges of the darkness writhing like a living thing. You belong to me. The words don't come from the mirror. They come from fun inside. From the depth of the violet wound, where the gears turn backward and the hands of the clock spin in reverse. The reflection's face shifts again, the features rearranging themselves into something that was never human. The eyes. My eyes split open, the irises bleeding outward in black tendrils, the pupils elongating into vertical slits like a cat's. The cat, the gear-eyed thing that watches from the corners of the room, its voice slithering through the cracks in my skull. I reach out, fingers trembling, and press them against the glass. The surface is warm, olive. The heat seeps into my skin, burning like a brand, and the violet light flares, casting my shadow backward, not onto the wall but onto the mirror itself. My shadow moves first. It twists, the limbs elongating, the fingers stretching into talons, the face splitting open along the jawline to reveal the grinding gears inside. The cat's voice fills the space between my ribs, a vibration that rearranges the words before I can even form them. Oh, you are not Felix Young. You are mine. The mirror's breath hitches a wet twig gasp. That sounds like tearing paper. The reflection's mouth opens wider, and the gears inside twin-click into place, the teeth interlocking with a sound like a saw cutting through bone. My fingers press harder against the glass, and the heat becomes pain, a white-hot agony that radiates up my arm. The shadow on the mirror thrills, a sound like rusted hinges swinging open, and the violet light twit-ripsy through the reflection, unraveling the image of me into 1,000 jagged pieces. The last thing I see is my own face. Not in the mirror, but in the depth of the violet wound, the eyes wide and black and tunrung, the mouth stretched too wide, the teeth grinding against one another in silent, endless siscrity. You belong to me. My fingers sink into the drain's porcelain rim, slick with cold moisture that isn't water. It's the same greasy residue as the mirror's condensation, clinging to my skin like a second layer of skin. The violet light erupts from the drain's mouth. Not a glow, but a footwoof thick and viscous as congealed blood. It floods my wrist, burning through the skin, and I feel the wet crackle of bone splitting beneath my fingers. Not a snap, but a slow, deliberate fronty on spooling, like wet parchment tearing under a thumb. My hand isn't mine anymore. The skin is peeling back, revealing the bone beneath, the marrow glowing faintly violet. The drained surface ripples, no longer porcelain but a clockwork eye. Its iris a spinning gear, the teeth of the cogs grinding together with a sound like a sword dragging through wet bone. The cat's voice isn't a whisper, it's a vibration in my sternum. The words forming from the sound of the tearing chore secret is my language. The words are wet, like the taste of blood flooding my tongue. My fingers retract, and where my hand was, a single gear is embedded, its teeth biting into the porcelain edge. It's warm, alive, and funrang, the metal humming with a frequency that rattles my teeth. I look up, and the drain's face, no, the mirror above it, reflects not my face but the clockwork eye, the gears turning backward, the pupils dilating into vertical slits. The violet light flares, and the reflection's mouth opens wider than possible, the lips peeling back to reveal rows of tiny, interlocking gears where teeth should be. The sound is deafening, the squeaky, a high-pitched shriek of metal against metal, filling my skull until it feels like my own teeth are grinding together. The reflection's voice echoes inside the sound, a wet-foot gurgle of gears turning, wah the drain. I try to pull back, but my hand is fused to the porcelain, the gear embedded in the flesh, now shoing growing, the teeth sinking deeper, the twined wet bone sound of it echoing in the hollow space where my wrist used to be. The drain's face shifts, the clockwork eye blinking once, twice, and the reflection's final words aren't heard, they're felt. A vibration in the marrow of my bones. You are the drain. The violet light pulses, and the drain's surface stream breathe. A slow wet forty hiss, a slow wet fortishi, as the clockwork eye turns toward me, the gears clicking into place with a sound like 1,000 tiny bones snapping.